Welcome to Warhammer 40k 8th edition battle report number 7, Chaos Demons of Khorne versus Death Guard, 1850 points, battle forged, matched play with chapter approved. This battle will be battle number 2 out of group 4. To start with, let's take a quick look at the board that the two armies will be playing on today. In this corner, we have objective marker 2. In the middle of this side of the board, we have objective marker 1. And then over in this corner, we have objective marker 4. On the opposite side of the table, in this 2 foot by 2 foot section, we have objective marker 3. Right here is objective marker 5. And finally, we have objective marker 6. First, we will need to roll for which of the standard deployment maps the armies will be playing on today. And here's the dice roll, getting a 4, which is the map Hammer and Anvil. On a 1, 2, or a 3, the Chaos Demons of Khorne will begin deploying on the near side of the table, and the Death Guard will begin deploying on the far side. And on a 4, 5, or 6, they will deploy on the opposite sides. So here's the dice roll for that, and that's going to be a 4. So the Death Guard will begin deploying in the closer deployment zone, and the Chaos Demons of Khorne will begin deploying in the farther deployment zone. Finally, we need to roll for who will begin to deploy first. On a 1, 2, or 3, it will be the Chaos Demons of Khorne, and on a 4, 5, or 6, it will be the Death Guard. And here's the dice roll, getting a 1. So the Chaos Demons of Khorne will begin deploying first. We will be back after the deployment. So taking a look at the board, now that the deployment has been finished, starting with the Death Guard side, we have a squad of Nurgling Swarms, the Plague Burst Crawler, Demon Prince of Nurgle with Wings, Demon Prince of Nurgle with Wings, Chaos Land Raider with the Malignant Plaguecaster, Plague Surgeon, Tallyman, and Plague Marine squad embarked inside, the second Nurgling Swarm, and finally Mortarion. In the Chaos Demons of Khorne deployment zone, we have a Skull Cannon, Squad of Bloodletters, Demon Prince of Khorne, Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage, second Squad of Bloodletters, second Skull Cannon, Scarbrand, Fleshhounds, third Skull Cannon, third Squad of Bloodletters, and the second Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage. The Death Guard did finish setting up their deployment first, as they only had 7 units to deploy versus the 11 from the Chaos Demons of Khorne, thanks to the models being embarked in the Land Raider all counting as 1. So the Death Guard will go first unless the Chaos Demons of Khorne seize the initiative, and here's the seize the initiative roll, and they failed to seize the initiative. So let's move into Death Guard turn 1. Since this is the chapter approved Maelstrom of War mission Targets of Opportunity, the Death Guard will start turn 1 by drawing 3 tactical objective cards. The first is Secure Objective 1, score 1 victory point if you control Objective Marker 1 at the end of your turn. And Objective Marker 1 is this one right here, in the no man's land between the Chaos Demons of Khorne and the Death Guard deployment zones. The second tactical objective card is Grandfather's Gift. Score 1 victory point if at least 1 enemy unit was completely destroyed during your turn, and the last model in the unit was slain by an attack made by a Death Guard model attacking with a plague weapon, i.e. a plague sword, the plague skull of Glalitha, or any weapon with the plague weapon ability. And the third tactical objective is Defend Objective 6. Score 2 victory points if you control Objective Marker 6 at the end of 2 consecutive turns. And Objective Marker 6 is this one right here, sitting inside the Chaos Demons of Khorne deployment zone. A reminder at the beginning of Death Guard turn 1 movement phase that the Death Guard have 6 command points, and the Chaos Demons of Khorne have 7 command points. So the first unit to move in the Death Guard movement phase will be this Chaos Demon Prince of Nurgle with Wings, who will move 12 inches up the board towards Objective Marker 1. And he will end his movement right here, within 3 inches of the center of Objective Marker 1. This Demon Prince of Nurgle is going to move up to behind the first Demon Prince of Nurgle who moved. And this Demon Prince will finish its movement here. This squad of 3 Nurgling Swarms will remain still. This Plague Burst Crawler will remain still. The second squad of 3 Nurgling Swarms will remain still. This Chaos Land Raider is going to move up the board into this area to be closer to these Chaos Demons of Khorne. After its 10 inches of movement, it ends up here. Finally, Mortarion is going to jump over this wall with his 12 inches of movement and end up in here. And after his 12 inches of movement, he ended up here. Going into the Psychic phase, we will start with Mortarion, who is going to cast Miasma of Pestilence and Blades of Putrefaction onto himself. Mortarion will start with Miasma of Pestilence. He needs a 6 in order to pass, and he gets it with the 7. The Fleshhounds that are nearby will attempt to deny the Witch, and they fail to do so. So now Mortarion will attempt to cast Blades of Putrefaction onto himself, needing a 5, and he gets that with a 7. So until the start of the next Death Guard Psychic phase, Mortarion will have Miasma of Pestilence and Blades of Putrefaction activated on himself. Next, both of these Demon Princes of Nurgle with wings are going to attempt to cast Smite onto this squad of Bloodletters. They will be done one at a time, and we will start with the Demon Prince of Nurgle with wings, who is further away. So starting with the Demon Prince who's further away, getting it on a 5, and it does go off. So this will do D3 mortal wounds, and it will do 2 mortal wounds to that unit. So 2 Bloodletters will go down. Now for the Demon Prince who is closer to the unit, getting it off on a 5, and he does with a 7. It will do D3 mortal wounds, and it will do 3 mortal wounds. So 3 more Bloodletters will go down. Going into the shooting phase for Death Guard turn 1, the Chaos Land Raider is going to fire its Combi Bolter at full range and its Twin Heavy Bolter into the wounded squad of Bloodletters, and it will fire both of its Twin Last Cannons into that Skull Cannon. Starting with the Combi Bolter onto the Bloodletters, 2 shots hitting on 3s, getting 1 hit, wounding on a 3, and it wounds. 5 up invulnerable save, which it fails. So 1 more Bloodletter will go down. Now for the 6 shots from the Twin Heavy Bolter, hitting on 3s, getting 4 hits, wounding on 3s, getting 1 wound, 1 5 up invulnerable save, which it fails. And so 1 more Bloodletter will go down from the squad. So now the 2 Twin Last Cannons, 4 shots hitting on 3s, getting 4 hits, wounding on 3s, getting 4 wounds, 4 5 up invulnerable saves, and fails 3. And these do D6 damage apiece, and that will be 10 wounds. And Skull Cannons only have 7 wounds base, so this Skull Cannon is removed. Next, Mortarion is going to shoot the Lantern into this Bloodthirster. Hitting on a 2, rerolling 1s, rerolling the 1, and here's the reroll, getting a hit. Strength 8 versus Toughness 7 means a 3 to wound, and it wounds. The Bloodthirster will take a 5 up invulnerable save, which it fails. And the Lantern does 3 damage, so this Bloodthirster will go from 16 starting wounds down to 13. Finally, this Plague Burst Crawler is going to fire its Heavy Slugger and its 2 Entropy Cannons into this Skull Cannon, and the Plague Burst Crawler will fire its Plague Burst Mortar into this wounded squad of Bloodletters. Starting with the Plague Burst Mortar, it does D6 shots and gets 6 shots. The Plague Burst Crawler did not move, so hitting on 4s, getting 2 hits. The Death Guard will use 1 command point, going from 6 down to 5, in order to reroll one of the failed hit rolls, needing a 4 on the reroll, and still failing to hit. Wounding on 2s, getting 2 wounds, and 2 5 up invulnerable saves, and they fail both. And so 2 more Bloodletters will go down, leaving only the Blood Reaper. So now the 4 shots from the Heavy Slugger from the Plague Burst Crawler into the Skull Cannon. 4 shots hitting on 4s, getting 2 hits. Strength 5 versus Toughness 7 means 5s to wound, getting no wounds. And now the 2 Entropy Cannons hitting on 4s, getting 2 hits. Wounding on 3s, getting 2 wounds. 2 5 up invulnerable saves, and passes 1, fails 1. So this will do D6 damage, and it will do 2 damage. So this Skull Cannon goes from 7 starting wounds down to 5. That is the end of the Death Guard turn 1 shooting phase. Moving into the assault phase, there are no charges to declare, as there are no Chaos Daemons of Khorne models within 12 inches of any Death Guard models. So we will go straight into the morale phase. So this squad of Bloodletters with just the Blood Reaper left will need to take a morale test because they are not within 8 inches of Scarbrand, meaning they will have to take the morale test. However, the Blood Reaper is close by to the Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage, and therefore will be able to use the Bloodthirster's leadership of 10 when taking the morale test. Because they lost 9 models, but they are using the Bloodthirster's leadership of 10, if they roll a 1, the Blood Reaper will survive. If they roll a 2 or higher, that Blood Reaper is removed. And here's the dice roll, and they get a 2, of course, so that Blood Reaper will be removed. And this whole Bloodletter squad is killed off. So taking a look at the tactical objective cards, at the end of turn 1, the Death Guard did secure objective 1 for 1 victory point. Because that Blood Reaper survived the Plague Burst Mortar attack, they did not complete Grandfather's Gift, and they also did not complete Defend Objective 6. So currently, at the end of Death Guard turn 1, the Death Guard are leading 2 victory points to 0, thanks to achieving Secure Objective 1 and for obtaining First Blood from killing that Skull Cannon. Going into Chaos Daemons of Khorne turn 1, a reminder that the Chaos Daemons of Khorne have all 7 of their command points, and the Death Guard are down to 5 command points. The Chaos Daemons of Khorne need to draw 3 tactical objective cards at the start of their turn, the first of which is Mission Critical Objective. When this tactical objective is generated, roll a d6, score 1 victory point if you control the corresponding objective marker. If the corresponding objective marker was controlled by your opponent at the start of your turn, and you control it at the end of your turn, score d3 victory points instead. So here's the dice roll for which objective marker it is, and it is objective marker 1, which is this objective right here, currently right next to 2 Demon Princes of Nurgle, and currently being held by this one. The second tactical objective card is Touched by the Warp. Score 1 victory point if you manifested or denied a psychic power during this turn. If you manifested or denied a psychic power with a Tzeentch demon unit during this turn, score d3 victory points instead. And the third tactical objective card is Area Denial. Score 1 victory point if there are no enemy models within 6 inches of the center of the board at the end of your turn. If there are no enemy models within 12 inches of the center of the battlefield at the end of your turn, score d3 victory points instead. So going into the movement phase for Chaos Daemons of Khorne, turn 1, this Skull Cannon and this Skull Cannon are going to remain still. This squad of Bloodletters is going to move up the board 6 inches towards the Death Guard deployment zone, and they will also declare an advance at the same time. And here's their advance roll, getting 1 extra inch. And so the Bloodletters will finish their movement right here. Next, this Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage is going to move 12 inches up the board to be closer to these Demon Princes of Nurgle. And the Bloodthirster will finish its movement right here. Next, this Demon Prince of Khorne with wings will also move up the board 12 inches to be closer to these Demon Princes of Nurgle. And it will finish its movement right here. Next, Scarbrand, with his 8-inch movement, is going to come around the corner and walk up towards the Death Guard deployment zone. And Scarbrand will finish his movement right here. Now this Bloodthirster is going to jump over this building 12 inches in order to be closer to Mortarion. And the Bloodthirster will finish its movement right here. Next, these Fleshhounds are going to move up the board 10 inches towards Mortarion. And the Fleshhounds will finish their movement right here. And finally, this squad of Bloodletters is going to move up the board up to 6 inches to follow in behind the Fleshhounds. And so the Bloodletters will finish their movement right here. Going into the shooting phase for Chaos Daemons of Khorne turn 1, this Skull Cannon is going to fire at the Death Guard Chaos Land Raider. The Skull Cannon has d6 shots and gets 2, hitting on 3s, getting 2 hits, wounding on 4s, and failing to wound. Finally, in the shooting phase, this Skull Cannon is going to fire at this Plague Burst Crawler. D6 shots from the Skull Cannon, getting 1 shot, hitting on a 3, and it hits, wounding on a 4, and it fails to wound. Going into the assault phase, we have multiple charges to declare. Starting with the Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage here, charging this lead Chaos Demon Prince of Nurgle with wings. The Chaos Demon Prince of Khorne is going to declare a multi-charge onto both of the Chaos Demon Princes of Nurgle with wings, with the primary target being the lead Demon Prince of Nurgle. Skarbrand is just within 12 inches of the Chaos Land Raider, and so he will declare a charge onto the Chaos Land Raider and hope to make it in. And then over here we have this Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage declaring a charge onto Mortarion, and the squad of Fleshhounds will also declare a charge onto Mortarion. So we will start with the charge from this Bloodthirster onto Mortarion, and we will start with the Overwatch. Overwatch from Mortarion, firing the Lantern, hitting on a 6, re-rolling 1s, and getting a 1. And with the re-roll, gets a 3. So the Overwatch fails. The charge distance for that Bloodthirster is going to be 3 inches. And since this Bloodthirster is just over an inch away, about an inch and a half, he will make it into combat. Now that Mortarion can no longer Overwatch, the Fleshhounds will charge in next, and here's their charge distance, getting 5 inches. And that will be enough for them to make it into combat. And here's where they ended up after their charge move. And before I forget, I will have them pile in. And so after the pile in move, they will all be in combat with Mortarion. Next, we will resolve Skarbrand, declaring a charge onto the Chaos Land Raider. So the Chaos Land Raider will Overwatch. Starting with the Combi Bolter, 4 shots hitting on 6s, all fail to hit. Next will be the Twin Heavy Bolter, 6 shots hitting on 6s, getting 3 hits. Wounding on 5s, and failing to wound. Finally, the 2 Twin Last Demons hitting on 6s, getting 1 hit. Wounding on a 3, and it wounds. Skarbrand will take a 5-up invulnerable save, and will fail. It does d6 wounds, and will do 4 wounds. And so Skarbrand will go from 16 starting wounds down to 12. And now we will roll for Skarbrand's charge distance, and he gets 8. Chaos Demons of Khorne will use a command point going from 7 down to 6 in order to re-roll the 2, since they need 12, and here's the re-roll. And they get it! Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness. Skarbrand makes a 12-inch charge onto a Land Raider. Oh, the Death Guard are in trouble this game. So he makes it in. Oh my goodness. So now this Bloodthirster will declare its charge onto this Demon Prince. And here's the charge range, getting 4 inches. Which is enough for this Bloodthirster to move up to the wall and be within an inch. And now this Demon Prince will declare its charge onto the both of them. Here's the charge range for the Demon Prince of Khorne, getting 7 inches. And that will be enough to make it into combat with both. And so that's how that combat looks after both the Demon Prince and the Bloodthirster finish their charge moves. And because the order of this could be very important, we will start with this Bloodthirst attacking Mortarion. So the Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage is going to use his Mighty Strike, which is the ×2 strength version of his attack. He has 6 attacks base, since he is still within the highest tier of his damage chart, but he gets +1 attack for charging, so 7 attacks total. He has a weapon skill of 2, but thanks to Miasma of Pestilence, he is hitting only 3s, and 6s generate a second automatic hit. So there's 1 6 in there, which will add an additional hit, but the 2s and the 1s miss, and he does not have any rerolls of any sort, so 5 hits total out of 7 attacks. These will be wounding on 2s, and getting 4 wounds. And the Chaos Demons of Khorne will use another command point, now that this is the fight phase and not the assault phase, going from 6 command points down to 5 in order to re-roll that failed wound roll. And so here's the wound roll, and it still fails to wound. So 4 up invulnerable saves. Makes 2, fails 2, and the Death Guard will use a command point going from 5 down to 4 in order to re-roll one of the failed invulnerable saves. And they still fail. So these do d6 damage apiece, but with the Mighty Strike from the Great Axe of Khorne on the Bloodthirster, you roll 2 dice and take the highest for how much damage it inflicts. So this is the first strike, will inflict 4 damage, and the second strike will inflict 5 damage, for a total of 9 damage onto Mortarion. So 9 5 disgustingly resilient rolls. and Mortarion only passes 2, failing 7. So Mortarion will go from 18 starting wounds down to 11. The Death Guard are then going to use 2 out of their 4 remaining command points, bringing them down to 2 command points left in order to use the stratagem Counteroffensive. This stratagem is used right after an enemy unit that charged is fought. Select one of your own eligible units and fight with it next. And so that will be Mortarion who will fight. And so Mortarion is going to put everything from Silence onto the Bloodthirster. And while we're on the subject of Mortarion, I had forgotten to do his Host of Plagues, so we will do that now. So a 4-up on the Bloodthirster, which fails, and a 4-up on the Fleshhounds, which does go off. And so this will do D3 mortal wounds on the Fleshhounds, and it will do 1 mortal wound. So this Fleshhound right here will go from 2 down to 1 wounds. So starting with Mortarion's main attacks, he will use his 6 attacks, base attacks, in Eviscerating Blow form from Silence onto the Bloodthirster. Sadly, Scarbrand is too far away to give him an extra attack. So hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s, getting 4 hits so far and 2 rerolls. And so here's the 2 rerolls and getting 2 more hits. So now wounding on 2s, rerolling 1s, and 6s generate mortal wounds. No mortal wounds, but 1 reroll so far. And here's the reroll. So 6 wounds will go through, 6 5-up invulnerable saves, and passes 2 failing 4. And these will do D6 damage apiece. And that will be 15 wounds. And the Bloodthirster only has 13 wounds left. So this Bloodthirster is removed. And so now Mortarion will attack with his Attendant's Claws and Teeth onto the Fleshhounds. And it will do D6 attacks, getting 4 attacks. Hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s, getting 3 hits so far, and the reroll, and all hit. Strength 2 versus Toughness 3 of the Fleshhounds, thanks to Mortarion subtracting 1 from their toughness, means 5s to wound, rerolling everything that misses, and getting 1 wound so far. Here's the others. And thanks to Blades of Putrefaction, he's actually hitting on 4s, but of course the rerolls happen before the modifiers, so would have had to reroll any 4s from the last roll. But getting 3 wounds, but also thanks to Blades of Putrefaction, that is 1 automatic mortal wound. So the automatic mortal wound will take off the Fleshhound that was down to 1 wound. So now the Fleshhounds will take 3 5-up invulnerable saves, and they pass 1 and fail 2. That means 1 more Fleshhound will completely go down. So now we will have the charging Fleshhounds attack Mortarion. There are 6 Fleshhounds left. So on the charge, the Fleshhounds are 3 attacks apiece for 18 attacks total. 18 attacks hitting on 3s. Actually hitting on 4s, thanks to Miasma of Pestilence. Although there's only 1 3 in there anyways. So getting 12 hits out of 18 attacks hitting on 4s. Strength 5 on the charge versus Toughness 7 means 5s to wound. And getting 3 wounds. 3 4-up invulnerable saves from Mortarion, and he saves 2 and fails 1, and these are only 1 damage apiece, so 1 5-up disgustingly resilient roll, which he fails. So Mortarion will go from 11 wounds down to 10. Next, we will resolve Scarbrand's attacks onto the Land Raider. Scarbrand, since he still has 12 wounds left, is at his highest tier on his damage chart, and so he has 6 attacks base, +1 for charging this turn, and +1 for being within 8 inches of himself. So 8 attacks total, hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, getting all hits. And he is using the Mighty Strike ability, otherwise he'd be attacking with a lot more attacks. And because there were 2 hit rolls of 6s in the previous hit roll, he actually got 10 hits out of 8 attacks. So using the Mighty Strike ability, because that's the form of this attack that he is using, he is ×2 strength. And on the charge, he is strength 8, so strength 16 total versus toughness 8 means 2s to wound, and getting 10 wounds. The Land Raider will have to take 10 6-up armor saves, and passes 1, failing 9. And these will do D6 damage apiece. And so it does a total of 29 damage. And so since the Land Raider only has 16 starting wounds, that is an overkill of 13 wounds, and now we will roll to see if it explodes. On a 6, the Land Raider explodes. And it does. So each unit within 6 inches suffers D6 mortal wounds. And so obviously Scarbrand is within 6 inches since he was in combat with it, and these Fleshhounds are also within 6 inches of the Land Raider. So starting with the d6 mortal wounds on Scarbrand, and he will take 5 mortal wounds. So Scarbrand will drop from the 12 wounds down to 7. And then the Fleshhounds will take 6 mortal wounds. So 3 more full Fleshhounds are just killed off, leaving only 3 left. And so now all of the models inside the Land Raider need to disembark. And so here's where the squad of 7 Plague Marines, the Tallyman, the Malignant Plaguecaster, and the Plague Surgeon all disembarked from the Land Raider. And now the Land Raider will be removed. And because those models disembarked from a vehicle that was destroyed, we have to roll a dice for each model, and on rolls of 1, models are removed. So here's my 10 dice rolls, and 2 models will go down. So we will remove 2 models with bubotic axes. But since they are within 8 inches of Scarbrand, they won't have to worry about taking a morale test this turn. So now we will do this Bloodthirster onto this Demon Prince of Nurgle. That Bloodthirster is about 8.5 to 9 inches away from Scarbrand, so he will not get an extra attack because of Scarbrand. So 6 attacks base since he's at full health, plus 1 for charging, means 7 attacks total, hitting on 2s. And all hit. And those 3 6s generate additional attacks. Or additional hits, I should say. So the Bloodthirster will go from 7 hits out of 7 attacks to 10 hits out of 7 attacks. Using his Mighty Strike, of course, times 2 strength, so wounding on 2s. And getting 8 wounds. So 8 5-up invulnerable saves, and passes 4. But 4 still go through, and because this is the Mighty Strike from a Great Axe of Khorne, we have to roll 2 dice for each of the d6 damage, and taking the highest. So strike number 1 will do 3 damage, strike number 2 will do 6 damage, strike number 3 will also do 3 damage, and strike number 4 will also do 6 damage. Did that I just roll like the same 2 sets of dice twice? What the heck was that? A 3 and a 2, double 6s, 3 and a 2, and double 6s. That's some interesting dice rolling right there. Getting a total of 18 damage. 18 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls. And he passes 9, which means he dies from 1 point of overdamage. I should say he dies from 1 point of overkill would make more sense, but they only have 8 wounds total, and 9 wounds go through. And so this, the lead Demon Prince of Nurgle, will be removed. So then the Demon Prince of Khorne with wings will attack the Demon Prince of Nurgle with wings. So the Demon Prince of Khorne is going to have 6 attacks on the charge with its Hellforged artifact Skull Reaver, plus 1 additional attack from its Malefic Talon. So starting with the 6 attacks from Skull Reaver, hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s thanks to himself. All 6 hit. Strength 11 on the charge versus toughness 6 means 3s to wound, getting 4 wounds, but no automatic mortal wounds. So 4 5-up invulnerable saves, and the Demon Prince of Nurgle saves 1, fails 3. And these are d6 damage apiece, only doing 7 wounds. So that Demon Prince will survive, potentially. So 7 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, and passes 2, failing 5. So this Demon Prince of Nurgle will go from 8 wounds down to 3. And then the 1 attack from the Demon Prince of Khorne's Malefic Talon, hitting on a 2, and it hits, wounding on a 3, and it wounds, and a 5-up invulnerable save, which it fails, and it's 2 damage, so 2 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, and it fails both. And so this Demon Prince of Nurgle will go from 3 wounds down to 1 left. That means the Demon Prince of Nurgle will get to strike back against the Demon Prince of Khorne with its 2 Malefic Talons, so 7 attacks total. Hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s thanks to himself, and thank goodness for that, with 3 1s in there. So 4 hits to start and 3 rerolls, all hit. Strength 7 versus toughness 6 means 3s to wound, and that's a lot of failed wounds, only getting 2. So 2 5-up invulnerable saves, which both fail, and they are 2 damage apiece. So the Demon Prince of Khorne will go from 8 starting wounds down to 4. So now that we're at the end of the fight phase, the Chaos Demons of Khorne are going to use 3 command points, going from 5 down to 2, in order to use the stratagem Frenetic Bloodlust in order to allow one of their units to attack again. And the Chaos Demons of Khorne are going to have this Demon Prince of Khorne with wings attack for a second time against the Chaos Demon Prince of Nurgle. So now for the second round of attacks from the Demon Prince of Khorne with wings, starting with the 6 attacks from the Skull Reaver, since he still has the buffs for charging this turn, and then we'll do the 1 attack from the Malefic Talon if necessary. So from the Skull Reaver, 6 attacks, hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s, getting 2 1s to reroll. And the 2 rerolls, getting 5 hits. Wounding on 6s, wounding on 3s, with 6s causing automatic mortal wounds, but only getting 2 wounds. 2 5-up invulnerable saves, and fails both. And these will do d6 damage apiece, for a total of 10 damage. 10 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, and that Demon Prince of Nurgle will go down. So even without the extra attack from the Malefic Talon, this Demon Prince of Nurgle is removed. Neither of these units will consolidate. Scarbrand will not consolidate since he's already so close to the Plague Marines. But we will need to do a morale test for the Fleshhounds, and they lost 5 models this turn. So the Fleshhounds have a leadership of 7, and here's their morale check, and they roll a 6, which means the final 3 models are removed because they went over their leadership by 4. And the Chaos Demons of Khorne are going to use a command point, bringing them from 2 down to 1 in order to re-roll that dice, because they really need Mortarion to remain locked in combat during the next Death Guard turn so that he can't move around freely. So anything other than a 5 or a 6, and they get a 2, which means they actually pass their leadership and no further Fleshhounds are removed. So taking a quick look at the tactical objective cards at the end of Chaos Demons of Khorne turn 1, they did achieve area denial for 1 victory point, as there are no Death Guard units within 6 inches of the center of the board. However, because those Plague Marines disembarked on that side of the Land Raider when the Land Raider was removed, there are Death Guard units within 12 inches of the center, so they will not get the D3 option, but they still will get 1 victory point. They did not complete Touched by the Warp, and they did complete Mission Critical Objective, which is objective marker number 1, and they did take it from the Death Guard's control, which means they will get D3 victory points. And so here's the roll for that, and they will only get 1 victory point. So at the end of the bottom of turn 1, the score is currently tied at 2 victory points apiece. Going into Death Guard turn 2, a reminder that the Death Guard have 2 command points left, and the Chaos Demons of Khorne have 1 command point left. Because this is the chapter-approved Maelstrom of War mission, Targets of Opportunity, at the start of each player's turn, before generating new tactical objectives, all of their remaining active tactical objectives are discarded. The window of opportunity to achieve these has been lost. However, there is a mission stratagem for Targets of Opportunity for 2 command points called Second Chance. Use this stratagem at the start of your turn before discarding your tactical objectives. Select 1 active tactical objective. That one will not be discarded due to the opportunity loss rule. You still generate 3 new ones after the others have been discarded, for a total of 4. And so the Death Guard will use their 2 remaining command points, going from 2 down to 0, in order to hold on to the tactical objective card, Grandfather's Gift, so that they get 1 more turn to attempt to complete that. But that will mean that Defend Objective 6 will be discarded. So after holding on to Grandfather's Gift, the Death Guard then draw 3 new tactical objective cards, and they draw Spread Contagion. When this tactical objective is generated, nominate one of your Death Guard characters, score 1 victory point if this character is still alive at the end of the game, and the Death Guard will nominate Mortarion, not that it matters because they will have to throw away that tactical objective card at the beginning of the next turn anyways. Defend Objective 4, score 2 victory points if you control Objective Marker 4 at the end of 2 consecutive turns. That will also be impossible to achieve. And finally, Overwhelming Firepower, score 1 victory point if an enemy unit was destroyed during the shooting phase of your turn. If 3 or more enemy units were destroyed during the shooting phase of your turn, score D3 victory points instead. So going into the movement phase of Death Guard turn 2, this Plague Burst Crawler will remain still. This squad of 3 Nurgling Swarms will remain still. The second squad of 3 Nurgling Swarms will remain still. Mortarion will remain locked in combat with the Fleshhounds. Finally, the Plague Marines, the Plague Surgeon, the Malignant Plaguecaster, and the Tallyman are all going to move 5 inches towards Scarbrand, or they're going to move up to 5 inches towards Scarbrand in order to be into a better position for the ensuing Psychic phase, Shooting phase, Assault phase, and Fight phase. So starting with the Tallyman will finish his movement here, just over an inch away from Scarbrand. Next, the Malignant Plaguecaster, who will finish his movement right here, just over an inch away from Scarbrand. Now for the Plague Surgeon, who will finish his movement here, just over an inch away from Scarbrand. And then finally, the Plague Marines. The Plague Marines will finish their movement right here, with their closest guy being just over an inch away from Scarbrand. Moving into the Psychic phase for Death Guard turn 2, we will start with the Malignant Plaguecaster, who will cast Smite onto Scarbrand, and he will cast Putrescent Vitality onto himself. Starting with Smite onto Scarbrand, needing a 5 and getting a 7. The Fleshhounds nearby will attempt to deny the Witch, and they fail to do so. This will do D3 mortal wounds, and it will do 2 mortal wounds onto Scarbrand. So Scarbrand will go from 7 remaining wounds down to 5. Now the Malignant Plaguecaster will cast Putrescent Vitality onto himself, needing a 6, and he gets it with an 8. So the Malignant Plaguecaster will now be +1 Strength and +1 Toughness. And now Mortarion will cast Miasma of Pestilence and Blades of Putrefaction onto himself. Starting with Miasma of Pestilence, needing a 6, and gets it with a 9. So now the Chaos Demons of Khorne must subtract 1 from their hit rolls when targeting Mortarion. And finally, Blades of Putrefaction, needing a 5, and getting it with a 6. So Mortarion will now add 1 to his wound rolls, and wound rolls of 7+ cause automatic mortal wounds. Going into the Shooting phase for Death Guard turn 2, this Plague Burst Crawler is going to fire everything it has onto this Wounded Skull Cannon. Starting with the Heavy Slugger, 4 shots, hitting on 4s, getting 3 hits. Wounding on 5s, getting 1 wound. It is -1 AP, so the Skull Cannon will take a 4-up armor save and fails it. The Heavy Slugger is only 1 damage, so the Skull Cannon will go from 5 wounds down to 4. Next, the Plague Burst Crawler will fire its Plague Burst Mortar, which will do D6 shots, getting 3 shots, hitting on 4s, getting 2 hits, wounding on 3s, re-rolling 1s, getting 1 hit, or getting 1 wound. The Skull Cannon will take a 5-up invulnerable save, which it passes. Finally, the 2 Entropy Cannons, 1 shot apiece, hitting on 4s, getting 1 hit, wounding on a 3, and failing to wound. Next, Mortarion will fire his Lantern, which is a pistol, into the Fleshhounds. 1 shot, hitting on a 2, re-rolling 1s, and getting a hit. Wounding on a 2, and fails to wound. And then we have, finally, this group firing bolt pistols and plasma pistols into Scarbrand. The Malignant Plaguecaster, the Plague Surgeon, and the Plague Champion have bolt pistols, and the Tallyman has a plasma pistol. We will do the 3 bolt pistols at the same time since they are all hitting on 3s, and they are all the same stat lines. So 3 bolt pistols, hitting on 3s, getting 3 hits, wounding on 5s, getting 2 wounds, 2 3-up armor saves, and fails both. So Scarbrand will drop from 5 wounds down to 3. So now the Tallyman will fire his plasma pistol. He is going to fire a standard shot, hitting on a 3, and it hits. Wounding on a 4, and it fails to wound. Moving into the Death Guard turn 2 assault phase, we have 4 charges to declare. The Tallyman will declare charge on Scarbrand. The Malignant Plaguecaster will declare charge on Scarbrand. The Plague Surgeon will declare charge on Scarbrand. And the Plague Marines will declare charge on Scarbrand. We will start with the Plague Surgeon and his Relic the Separating Plate, which will take the Overwatch from Scarbrand. So Scarbrand's Bellow of Endless Fury is D6 shots, getting 2 shots. They automatically hit, so Strength 5 versus Toughness 5 means 4 is to wound, and both fail to wound. And because no one is charging through this crater here, and they are all just over an inch away, they will all make it into combat. and everyone will be in combat. So going into the fight phase, we will first do Mortarian's Host of Plagues onto the Fleshhound, since that happens at the beginning of the fight phase. And needing 4, and it gets it. So it will do D3 mortal wounds, and it'll do 1 mortal wound. So this Fleshhound will go from 2 down to 1 wounds. So now going into the actual fight phase, we will start with the Plague Marines, starting with the 2 armed with Flails of Corruption. They get D3 attacks apiece for a total of 4 attacks. And actually, because they are within 8 inches of Scarbrand, they get an extra attack characteristic apiece, so 2 more D3 attacks, and getting an extra 5, for a total of 9 attacks from the Flails of Corruption on the Scarbrand, hitting on 3s, re-rolling thanks to the Tallyman. Getting 4 out of 9 hits so far, and the 5 rerolls, getting a total of 6 hits out of 9 attacks. Strength 6 versus Toughness 7 means wounding on 5s, rerolling 1s. Getting 2 wounds so far and 1 reroll. And here's the reroll. Still failing to wound. And actually only getting 1 wound out of that group since I misread one of the 4s. So minus 2 AP means a 5 up and vulnerable save, which he passes. So now the 2 Plague Marines armed with Bubonic Axes will go. Because they have Bubonic Axes and Plague Knives, they have an attacks characteristic of 2, which goes up to 3 thanks to Scarbrand. So 6 attacks from the 2 guys armed with Bubonic Axes. Hitting on 3s, re-rolling thanks to the Tallyman, getting 4 hits so far. And here's the 2 re-rolls, getting a total of 5 hits. Strength 5 versus Toughness 7 means 5s to wound, re-rolling 1s, getting 2 wounds and 1 re-roll. And here's the re-roll, and still fails to wound. So 2 5-up and vulnerable saves, and fails both. So Scarbrand will go from 3 wounds down to 1. So then the Plague Champion will go, and he will attempt to kill Scarbrand with his Plague Knife in order to achieve the tactical objective card, Grandfather's Gift. Because he's within 8 inches of Scarbrand, he has 3 attacks base. Hitting on 3s, re-rolling thanks to the Tallyman, getting 2 hits so far, and 1 re-roll, and all 3 hit. Wounding on 5s, re-rolling 1s, and all fail to wound. So then the Plague Surgeon will attack next with his Bale Sword. Because he's within 8 inches of Scarbrand, he will have 4 attacks. Hitting on 3s, re-rolling thanks to the Tallyman, getting 2 hits. And the 2 re-rolls, getting all 4 hits. Wounding on 5s, re-rolling 1s, and getting 2 wounds. 2 5-up invulnerable saves, and he fails 1. So they will use, the Chaos Demons of Khorne will use their last command point in order to re-roll that failed invuln save, in order to try to keep Scarbrand alive. And so here's the re-roll, and they still fail. And so Scarbrand will be removed and killed off by a plague weapon. And all of these various units will not consolidate, because some would have to consolidate towards the Fleshhounds, and some would have to consolidate towards the Demon Prince. So they want to stay close together so that they all benefit from each other's auras, so they will remain right there. And finally, we'll resolve Mortarion versus the Fleshhounds, starting with Mortarion, since it is the Death Guard turn. So Mortarion, since he has 10 wounds left, is still at his highest tier on his damage chart, which means he has 6 attacks base, and he will use the Reaping Scythe form of Silence, which means he gets 3 attacks. He gets to make 3 hit rolls per base attack. So Mortarion will have 18 attacks, hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, getting 6 1s so far. And here's the 6 re-rolls, getting 4 more hits, for a total of 16 hits out of 18 attacks. Strength users, so Strength 8 versus Toughness 3, thanks to subtracting 1 from their Toughness value. So wounding on 2s, re-rolling 1s, 6s cause automatic mortal wounds. So we have 1 automatic mortal wound so far, and 5 re-rolls. And here's the re-rolls. Still getting 3 1s, but getting a total of 13 wounds, plus 1 automatic mortal wound. And so the automatic mortal wound will remove the final wound on the wounded Fleshhound. And so the 2 remaining Fleshhounds with 2 wounds apiece have to take 13 5-up invulnerable saves. And they definitely fail at least 4, although they only failed 7, passing 6, but that's still enough to remove the final 2 Fleshhounds. And so this unit of Fleshhounds is removed. And Mortarion will consolidate 3 inches towards those bloodletters. And Mortarion will finish his consolidation move right here. So that is the end of the fight phase of Death Guard turn 2. There are no morale checks to take, as there are no units remaining that lost models this turn. So now let's take a quick look at the tactical objective cards. So the Death Guard did complete Grandfather's Gift for 1 victory point. Thanks to the Skull Cannon staying alive, they did not complete Overwhelming Firepower. They obviously will not complete Defend Objective 4 this turn, because they just drew it. And Spread Contagion cannot be completed until the end of the game, so those 3 will be thrown away at the beginning of Death Guard turn 3, but they do get 1 victory point for Grandfather's Gift. So at the very end of Death Guard turn 2, the Death Guard are currently leading 4 victory points versus the Chaos Demons of Khorne, who have 2 victory points, thanks to the Death Guard killing Scarbrand and obtaining Slay the Warlord. Going into Chaos Demons of Khorne, turn 2, a reminder that both sides have 0 command points left. At the start of their turn, Chaos Demons of Khorne will have to throw away Touched by the Warp. And then the Chaos Demons of Khorne draw 3 new tactical objective markers, and they draw Domination, score D3 plus 3 victory points if you control every objective marker on the battlefield at the end of your turn, which will be impossible to achieve. Defend Objective 2, score 2 victory points if you control objective marker 2 at the end of 2 consecutive turns. That will also be impossible to achieve. And Defend Objective 4, score 2 victory points if you control objective marker 4 at the end of 2 consecutive turns, which is also impossible. So the Chaos Demons of Khorne just drew 3 impossible to achieve tactical objective cards. So at the beginning of the Chaos Demons of Khorne movement phase, this Skull Cannon will remain still, and the other Skull Cannon will remain still. This squad of Blood Reapers is going to move up the board 6 inches, and they will also declare an advance roll. Here's their advance roll, getting an extra 6 inches. So after their 12 inches of total movement, they will end up here. Next, this Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage is going to move 12 inches towards the Plague Marines and the other characters. And the Bloodthirster will finish its movement here, just over an inch away from any enemy models. Next, the Demon Prince of Khorne is also going to move 12 inches up the board towards those Plague Marines. And the Demon Prince of Khorne will end his movement here, just over an inch away. Finally, these Bloodletters are going to move up the board 6 inches towards Mortarion. And they will finish their movement here, just over an inch away from Mortarion. Going into the Chaos Demons of Khorne turn 2 shooting phase, we will start with this Skull Cannon, who will fire at the Plague Burst Crawler. The Skull Cannon has D6 shots, getting 3. Hitting on 3s, getting 2 hits. Wounding on 4s, and fails to wound. And now this Skull Cannon will fire at this squad of Nurglings. D6 shots, getting 4. 4 shots, hitting on 3s, getting 3 hits. Wounding on 2s, getting 3 wounds. 3 5-up invulnerable saves, passes 1 and fails 2. And since these only do D3 wounds apiece, they would only be able to take out 1 model total, regardless of how much damage they produce. So we will roll them together for only a total of 3 damage. And since Nurgling Swarms are squishable, they don't get to take Disgustingly Resilient against the Skull Cannon's attacks, so one of the Nurgling Swarms will go from 4 wounds down to 1. And that's it for the shooting phase, so moving into the assault phase, there are 3 charges to declare. First is the Chaos Demon Prince of Khorne with Wings will declare a charge into the Plague Marines. The Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage will declare a charge into all 4 units, with the primary target being the Tallyman. And finally, this squad of Bloodletters will declare charge into Mortarion. So we'll start with the Bloodletters charging into Mortarion, and we'll start with his Overwatch from the Lantern, hitting on a 6 and failing to hit. Charge range for the Bloodletters, and they get 10 inches. And so now all the Bloodletters are in combat with Mortarion. Next, we will do the Demon Prince of Khorne, charging into the Plague Marines. There's 1 bolt pistol of Overwatch, hitting on a 6, and it fails to hit. Here's the charge range for the Demon Prince, and he gets 8 inches. He is charging through a crater, so that goes down to 6, but that will be more than enough. And so now the Demon Prince is locked in combat with those Plague Marines. And so now the charge from the Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage into every one of that group. There are 2 bolt pistols and a plasma pistol for Overwatch. We will do the bolt pistols from the Malignant Plaguecaster and the Plague Surgeon first, and we'll do them together because it doesn't really matter, both needing 6s and failing to hit. And now the plasma pistol firing a standard shot, and it fails to hit. Charge distance for the Bloodthirster, getting 3 inches, which is more than enough for the Bloodthirster to be engaged with the Tallyman, the Malignant Plaguecaster, the Plague Surgeon, and the Plague Marines. So at the beginning of the fight phase, we have to do Mortarian's Host of Plagues onto the Bloodletters, needing a 4 and failing to get it. So first we will resolve the Bloodletters attacks onto Mortarian. Since they charged, they have 21 attacks on the charge, thanks to the Blood Reaper having an extra base attack. So 21 attacks, hitting on 4s thanks to Miasma of Pestilence, and getting 13 hits. Strength 5 versus Toughness 7 means 5s to wound, with 6s causing 2 damage instead of 1. And so that results in 6 wounds, with 3 of them causing double damage. So 3 4-up invulnerable saves against the single damage, passing 2 and failing 1, and 3 4-up invulnerable saves against the double damage, passing 1 and failing 2. So 5 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, and passes 1, failing 4. So Mortarian will go from 10 wounds down to 6. The next charging unit we will resolve will be the Demon Prince of Khorne with wings against the Plague Marines. So the Demon Prince of Khorne will have 6 attacks with his Hellforged Artifact Skull Reaver on the charge, plus 1 additional attack from his Malefic Talon. So starting with the 6 attacks from the Skull Reaver, hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s thanks to himself, getting 4 hits so far and 2 rerolls, and here's the rerolls, getting 1 more hit. Strength 11 on the charge versus Toughness 5 means 2s to wound, and no 6s for automatic mortal wounds, and of course rolling 2 1s, and not being able to reroll failed wound rolls. And these are minus 4 AP, which means that the Plague Marines will not have an armor save at all, and they are D6 wounds apiece, so we will have to do these separately. So the first strike will do 1 wound, 1 5-up disgustingly resilient roll, rerolling 1s thanks to being within 3 inches of the Plague Surgeon, and the reroll, and fails. The second strike will do 5 damage, 5 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, passes 3, but 1 more Marine will go down, and finally the third strike will do 6 damage. 6 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, and definitely will go down, even with 2 rerolls. So far 3 Marines will go down, and we will remove the 2 Bubotic Axes, and 1 of the Flails of Corruption. And so then the 1 attack from the Malefic Talon hitting on a 2, which hits, wounding on a 3, and it wounds. 5-up armor save, which fails, and it's 2 damage, so 2 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, passes 1, fails 1, and so the final Flail of Corruption will go down. Then we will resolve the Bloodthirster's attacks onto the 4 units. So the Bloodthirster is going to place, since he has 6 attacks base, plus 1 attack for charging, for a total of 7 attacks, he will place 2 Mighty Strike attacks onto the Tallyman, 2 Mighty Strike attacks onto the Malignant Plaguecaster, 2 Mighty Strike attacks onto the Plague Surgeon, and 1 Sweeping Blow attack onto the Plague Champion, which is the final member of the Plague Marine squad. But that, of course, because it is a Sweeping Blow, lets him make 2 hit rolls instead of just 1. So we will first do the 1 attack from the Sweeping Blow, which is actually 2 attacks onto the Plague Champion, hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s thanks to being within 6 inches of the Demon Prince of Khorne. So 1 hit so far with 1 reroll, getting 2 hits. Strength 8 on the charge versus Toughness 5 means 3s to wound, and getting 2 wounds. 2 5-up armor saves, passes 1, fails 1, and it's only 1 damage apiece, so 1 5-up disgustingly resilient roll, which fails. And so the Plague Champion will be removed, which will be the death of that squad. Now for the 2 Mighty Strike attacks onto the Malignant Plaguecaster, hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s, getting 2 hits. Strength 16 versus Toughness 6 means wounding on 2s, and only getting 1 wound, of course. However, it is minus 4 AP, and the Malignant Plaguecaster does not have an invuln save, so he does not get an armor save, or any sort of save at all. And it does d6 damage, but we roll 2 dice and take the highest, and it will do 3 damage. So 3 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, and passes 2, failing 1. So the Malignant Plaguecaster will go from 4 starting wounds down to 3. Now for the 2 Mighty Strike attacks onto the Tallyman, hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s. That's a cocked dice. So rerolling cocked dice, and both hit. And because one of those is a 6, it generates an additional hit. So getting 3 hits out of 2 attacks, wounding on 2s, getting 3 wounds. The Tallyman will also not get a save, because minus 4 EP and he doesn't have an invuln. So d6 damage apiece, rolling 2 dice, taking the highest. So the first strike will do 6 damage. The second strike will do 4 damage. And the third strike will do 2 damage. So doing a total of 12 damage. 12 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, re-rolling the 1, thanks to the Plague Surgeon being nearby, but still failing. And he passes 5, but fails 7, and he only has 4 wounds, and so the Tallyman will be removed. Finally, the 2 Mighty Strike attacks onto the Plague Surgeon, hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, thanks to the Daemons of Khorne, and getting an additional hit thanks to the 6. So 3 hits out of 2 attacks. Wounding on 2s, getting 2 wounds. Minus 4 AP, but the Plague Surgeon does have the Suppurating Plate, giving him a 2-up armor save. So 2 6-up saves, and fails both. And so these do d6 damage apiece, rolling 2 dice, taking the highest. So the first strike will do 4 damage, and the second strike will do 6 damage, doing a total of 10 damage. So 10 5-up disgustingly resilient rolls, re-rolling 1s, and passing 6, but failing 4, which is just enough to kill off the Plague Surgeon. I need to go back to the Death Guard turn and resolve the Tallyman's ability to potentially get the command points back from that stratagem to hold on to Grandfather's Gift. So, because this would have been done back in the Death Guard turn, when the Tallyman was still alive, we roll 2 dice, and if the result is a 7, they get the command points for that stratagem back, and they don't, so it doesn't matter. Wanted to resolve that before I forget and get called out for having forgotten to use that. But it wouldn't have mattered, they wouldn't have gotten it back anyways. Otherwise, they potentially could have used a command point here to, if they had gotten those command points back, they potentially could have tried to save the Plague Surgeon, but it was all for nothing. So now we will resolve the Malignant Plaguecaster's attacks back onto the Bloodthirster. Malignant Plaguecaster is 3 attacks base, hitting on 3s, getting all 3 hits. Thanks to his Corrupted Staff and Putrescent Vitality, he has Strength 7 versus Toughness 7, wounding on 4s. And it didn't matter, getting 1 wound. Minus 1 AP, so a single 4-up armor save, which passes. And so now we will resolve Mortarian's attacks onto the Bloodletters. So since Mortarian is down to 6 wounds, he only has 5 attacks base, but he will again use his Reaping Scythe ability from Silence, which will give him 3 hit rolls per base attack. So 15 attacks, hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s. Getting 12 hits so far with 3 re-rolls. And the 3 re-rolls, getting all 15 hits. Wounding on 2s, re-rolling 1s, 6s cause automatic mortal wounds. And so far there are 6 mortal wounds. There are 4 mortal wounds, but 6 re-rolls. So here's the 6 re-rolls, and a cocked dice. Getting an additional mortal wound. So getting 13 wounds, but also 5 automatic mortal wounds. So we'll start with the 5 automatic mortal wounds, which will take off 5 of the Bloodletters, leaving 5 Bloodletters left in combat. So now 13 5-up invulnerable saves, and they pass 6, but fail 7, which I think is exactly what the Fleshhounds did the turn before, but they fail at least 5, which means the 5 remaining Bloodletters will be removed. And so this squad of Bloodletters is completely wiped out. And so now Mortarian will consolidate 3 inches towards the closest visible enemy unit, which happens to be the Bloodthirster. And he will finish his consolidation move right here. And so at the end of Chaos Daemons of Khorne turn 2, there are no morale tests to take, as that Plague Marine squad and the Bloodletter squad were both completely wiped out. And we already knew at the beginning of the turn that the 3 objective cards that they drew were impossible to achieve, so they did not achieve any victory points this turn, which means at the end of Chaos Demons of Khorne turn 2, which is also the end of game turn 2, the score still stands at 4 victory points for the Death Guard versus 2 victory points for the Chaos Demons of Khorne. Going into Death Guard turn 3, we need to start by throwing away all 3 remaining active tactical objective cards that the Death Guard have. So Spread Contagion, Defend Objective 4, and Overwhelming Firepower will all be thrown away. And so the 3 new tactical objective cards that the Death Guard drew is Death March, score 1 victory point if at least 3 friendly Death Guard infantry are completely within your opponent's half of the battlefield, and that will be impossible to achieve. Area Denial, score 1 victory point if there are no enemy models within 6 inches of the center of the battlefield at the end of your turn. If there are no enemy models within 12 inches of the center of the battlefield at the end of your turn, score D3 victory points instead. Depending on how this turn goes, that one might be possible to achieve. And Defend Objective 5, score 2 victory points if you control Objective Marker 5 at the end of 2 consecutive turns, and that will be impossible. So going into the movement phase, first things first, this Plague Burst Crawler is going to remain still. This squad of 3 Nurgling Swarms is going to remain still. And this squad of 3 Nurgling Swarms is going to remain still. Next, this Malignant Plaguecaster is going to fall back 5 inches away from the Bloodthirster in this direction. And the Malignant Plaguecaster will fall back to here. And finally in the movement phase, Mortarion is going to move up the board to be closer to the Khorne monstrous creatures. And Mortarion will end up here, just over an inch away from the Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage. So going into the Psychic phase, the Malignant Plaguecaster is going to cast Smite onto the Demon Prince of Khorne with wings, and he will also cast Gift of Contagion onto the Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage. So starting with Smite onto the Demon Prince of Khorne with wings, needing a 5 and getting an 8. So it will pass, and Khorne no longer has any Deny the Witch rolls. And so this will do D3 mortal wounds, and it will do 2 mortal wounds. So the Demon Prince of Khorne with wings will go from 4 wounds down to 2. Then the Malignant Plaguecaster will cast Gift of Contagion onto the Bloodthirster, needing a 7, and getting it with a 7. And so now we roll a D3 and consult the chart, and it will get a 2 on the chart, which is Muscular Atrophy, which is -1 strength. So until the beginning of the next Psychic phase for the Death Guard, the Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage will be at -1 strength. And now Mortarion will cast Blades of Putrefaction and Miasma of Pestilence onto himself. Starting with Miasma of Pestilence, which needs a 6, and gets it with a 9. And now for Blades of Putrefaction, which needs a 5, and he fails. So Blades of Putrefaction does not go off. Going into the shooting phase for Death Guard turn 3, we will start with the Plague Burst Crawler, firing everything it has into the Wounded Skull Cannon. Starting with the 2 Entropy Cannons, hitting on 4s, getting 2 hits. Wounding on 3s, getting 2 wounds. 2 5-up invulnerable saves, and fails both. And these do D6 damage apiece, and it will do 8 damage, which is enough to completely remove that Skull Cannon. And so this Skull Cannon will be removed. This does mean that the Heavy Slugger and the Plague Burst Mortar on the Plague Burst Crawler do go to waste. Finally, in the shooting phase, Mortarion is going to fire the Lantern into the Bloodthirster. Hitting on a 2, and it hits. Wounding on a 3, and it fails to wound. Going into the Assault phase, for Death Guard turn 3, there is only 1 charge to declare, and it is a multi-charge from Mortarion onto both the Bloodthirster and the Demon Prince of Khorne, with the Bloodthirster being the primary target. There is no Overwatch, so here's the charge range, and he makes it in with a 5. And so now Mortarion, with his 6 remaining wounds, is locked in combat with both the Bloodthirster and the Demon Prince of Khorne. At the beginning of the fight phase, we will start with Mortarion's Host of Plagues, and now that he is down to 6 wounds, it activates on a 5 instead of a 4. So starting with the Demon Prince of Khorne, which does activate, and it will do D3 mortal wounds, and it does 3 mortal wounds. So thanks to Host of Plagues, which will do 3 mortal wounds, the Demon Prince of Khorne is removed from combat. And now on a 5-up, it will activate on the Bloodthirster, and it does not. So now going into the actual fight phase, Mortarion will use all 5 of his attacks, now that he's down to 6 wounds, in Eviscerating Blow form, which is the ×2 strength. All 5 attacks will go onto the Bloodthirster, hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, thanks to himself. Getting 3 hits so far with 2 re-rolls, and all 5 hit. Strength 16 versus Toughness 7 means wounding on 2s, and all wound. Luckily for the Bloodthirster, Blades of Putrefaction did not go off, so that 6 does not cause an automatic mortal wound. But the Bloodthirster will have to take 5 5-up invulnerable saves, and fails all 5. And these will do d6 damage apiece, and that will do a grand total of 17 damage. And Bloodthirsters of Insensate Rage only have 16 starting wounds, and so that Bloodthirster is wiped out. So this Bloodthirster, which had all of its 16 starting wounds, is just removed. And so now Mortarion will consolidate a couple of inches towards the Bloodletters since they are the closest visible enemy unit. And he will finish his consolidation movement here. So that is the end of the Death Guard turn 3 fight phase. There are no morale checks to take, and so let's take a look at the tactical objective cards. So at the end of Death Guard turn 3, they did not complete Death March, they did not complete Defend Objective 5, but they did complete Area Denial, and there are no enemy units within 12 inches of the center of the board, so they get D3 victory points for that. And so here's the roll. Getting 3 victory points, of course. And so at the end of Death Guard turn 3, the score currently sits at 7 victory points for the Death Guard and 2 victory points for the Chaos Demons of Khorne. So going into Chaos Demons of Khorne turn 3, we first need to throw away the 3 previous active tactical objective cards, and they draw 3 new ones. First is Psychological Warfare. Score 1 victory point if your opponent failed a morale test during this turn. If your opponent failed 3 or more, score D3 victory points instead. Secure Objective 4. Score 1 victory point if you control Objective Marker 4 at the end of your turn. And Objective Marker 4 is this one right here, which was being controlled by the Skull Cannon the previous turn, but that Skull Cannon is now dead. And the closest Chaos Demon of Khorne unit is this Skull Cannon completely on the other side of this building. And the Dominion of Chaos. Score D3 victory points if you control more objective markers than your opponent at the end of this turn. And so because of where we are in the game, and the fact that the Chaos Demons of Khorne only have 1 squad of 10 Bloodletters and 1 Skull Cannon left, the Chaos Demons of Khorne are going to concede this game to the Death Guard, since at this point I do not feel like they have a chance to come back in victory points, and they are very close to being tabled, especially since a Plague Burst Crawler is left and Mortarion is still alive. So at this point we will declare the Death Guard the victors, with a total of 7 victory points to 2. So now that the Death Guard have been declared the victors of this game, with 7 victory points to 2, and because of a concession from the Chaos Demons of Khorne in the Chaos Demons of Khorne turn 3, I can go over some of my final thoughts in the game, starting with why I felt it was prudent for the Chaos Demons of Khorne to concede at this point. If we take a look at the board, there's only 2 Chaos Demon of Khorne units left, and Mortarion is in a very good position to, in the Death Guard next turn, to move up and engage the Bloodletters, which would wipe them out. We've seen Mortarion completely destroy full squads of Bloodletters earlier in this game, along with other Chaos Demon of Khorne units, so that would not be a stretch for him to do that. The other problem is that with the 3 new tactical objective cards that Khorne drew, I don't feel like they really have a chance to get any of the 3. The Skull Cannon is too far away for him to move and advance to secure Objective 4. It would be incredibly difficult for Khorne to get Death Guard to fail a morale check. They would have to focus on one of the Nurgling Swarms, but the problem is they would have to kill off 2 of the 3 Nurgling Swarms just to get them to attempt to take a morale test. And even then they would have to roll a 6 in order to fail, because they have a leadership of 7. And as we saw earlier in the game, Nurgling Swarms are pretty difficult to take down. And the only thing that would really be able to do that would be the Skull Cannon, which means the Skull Cannon would have to shoot a Nurgling Swarm instead of shooting Mortarion and trying to take some wounds off of him. And I don't think a Skull Cannon in a single round of shooting could finish off Mortarion and get Slay the Warlord, which means Mortarion would be free to move up and engage the Bloodletters. And those Bloodletters would then most likely be dead, which means the only thing Khorne would have left would be a Skull Cannon versus a bunch of things from the Death Guard side. And because of that, there is literally no way that that Khorne could hold more objectives than Death Guard, since Death Guard are currently holding 2, and Khorne only has 2 units left, so at most, even if they were able to reach the objectives, they would only be able to hold 2, and then they wouldn't be able to hold more. So pretty much all 3 tactical objective cards would be impossible to achieve, which means it would only be even more of a runaway victory for Death Guard at this point. So I felt strategically like it was a good choice for Khorne to concede at this point, because there would be nothing really in it for Khorne to continue, other than to potentially lose by more victory points and have the spread go more in Death Guard's favor. Because at the end of this group, we're going to take a look at wins and losses, but we're also going to take a look at, after all the battles are done, how many victory points each army had go for them and how many victory points each army had against them. And so, obviously at this point, Khorne loses. They lose 7-2, but that means they only lost by 5 victory points, rather than, say, losing by 12 and having that spread go more against them later. So I will say, in this particular battle, thought strategically there wasn't too much that I messed up on. I did remember to use Frenetic Bloodlust for the Chaos Demons of Khorne this time, which is good. The fact that Skarbrand made that 12-inch charge, maybe I should have moved Skarbrand in a different direction to engage something else, but the fact that he managed to move up and then make the 12-inch charge against the Land Raider meant that whole movement and whatnot worked out perfectly for them until Skarbrand died the next turn, of course, but that was because of a series of unfortunate events. And then the fact that the Death Guard only lost 2 models from disembarking from the destroyed transport. If they had lost a lot more, that could have changed the combat with Skarbrand. The other problem, which was personal choice but I felt was the better strategic move, was that the Chaos Demons of Khorne had to use one of their 2 remaining command points, and had they not used one of the 2 remaining command points, they potentially could have used counteroffensive, so that Skarbrand could have attacked after one of the charging units attacked, but they had to use a command point so that the Fleshhounds would stay alive, could re-roll their failed morale test and stay alive, which kept Mortarion locked in combat that turn, because had those Fleshhounds stuck with their initial morale test roll, they all would have been wiped out, which meant Mortarion would have been free to do whatever he wanted in the next Death Guard turn. And so keeping him locked in combat, I felt, was definitely more beneficial for Khorne. Now, of course, it ended up working out that Skarbrand died off, and then Mortarion finished off the Fleshhounds. And then in the Khorne turn, when the Bloodletters charged, I thought not only were they going to have a chance to do more damage than just 4 wounds, but that they also would have survived that combat, which would have kept Mortarion stuck in one more round of combat, which really would have changed things for Khorne's favor, because of course then Mortarion wouldn't have been able to move over and wipe out the Demon Prince and the Bloodthirster. And the fact that that Demon Prince died from losing 2 rounds to Smite, but then also losing its last 2 wounds to Mortarion's Host of Plagues, which needed a 5 to activate, not even a 4. Only a 33% chance of activating. And it went off, and of course, couldn't roll a 1 or a 2 for the D3, but instead rolled a 6, which did 3 mortal wounds, which was more than enough to finish off the Demon Prince of Khorne. And so he was able to focus all of his silence attacks onto the Bloodthirster instead of having to split up the attacks, which guaranteed the Bloodthirster's death. And he only died by 1 wound of overkill too, which is actually really crazy to think about. I mean, with 5d6 damage, potentially 30 damage, and it only did 17, which was barely enough to kill him off. The Bloodthirster and the Chaos Demons of Khorne in general just had really bad luck this game. Mortarion did not take very much damage throughout the game. He managed to wipe out everything he got into combat with. which did not help Khorne at all. They weren't able to do anything with their skull cannons, really, to make a difference. In fact, short of taking 3 wounds off of a Nurgling Swarm, I don't think the skull cannons did anything else this game. I think they took 3 wounds off of the 1 Nurgling Swarm, and that was it. They didn't do anything to the Plague Burst Crawler. They didn't do anything to anything else, I don't think. So those skull cannons, whereas last game, spoiler alert, but they did a lot more in the last game compared to this game. So I don't think that there was anything else I could have done differently on either side, especially considering the fact that Khorne did get a couple lucky charges with Scarbrand, and they managed to kill off the 2 Demon Princes of Nurgle in a single turn of close combat. So, I mean, I thought at that point that it was looking pretty good for Khorne, and especially with the Land Raider getting attacked from a 12-inch charge, which is just crazy. The fact that they managed to get that. I mean, I think I mentioned in Chaos Demons of Khorne turn 1 that it was looking really bad for the Death Guard, and now the Death Guard just pulled away and clearly have a overwhelming victory, almost sort of the opposite of what happened last game. So I don't know that I would have done anything differently. I think Khorne just had some really bad luck at the end, which sealed their fate, especially since they've sort of had 2 turns of drawing worthless objective cards. I mean, their first turn, they managed to complete 2 objective cards, which was really good, and then they didn't do anything. And then they weren't able to draw any good tactical objective cards in turn 2 or turn 3. So it sort of went against them in terms of objective cards and in terms of luck. It was really bad luck that, of course, they failed the morale check with the Fleshhounds and failed it enough to wipe all of them out, of course. Because had even just 1 survived, I wouldn't have used the command point to re-roll it because Mortarion still would have been locked in combat. Now, maybe he would have been able to finish it off in the psychic phase or in the shooting phase and still then been able to charge, but he wouldn't have been able to move up, and so it would have been a further charge range to the Bloodletters. But the fact that all 3 Fleshhounds would have died from that failed morale test meant that he would have been able to freely move and freely charge and freely shoot and all that sort of stuff, and that was just going to be too much of a problem for Khorne that they sort of had to waste the command point to re-roll the Fleshhounds. Now, of course, they all survived after that, but they all survived the morale test because the re-roll went in their favor, but then they were all just completely wiped out without getting another attack in, and then the rest of the game happened. So overall, I think the game went pretty well. It definitely was much faster than the previous game, considering we only got halfway into turn 3 before a concession, but that's the way some games go. It'll be very interesting to play the 3rd game of this series, Chaos Demons of Khorne versus Death Guard. Spoiler alert, once again, now that the 2 armies are tied at a game apiece, it'll be interesting to see what the tiebreaker brings. So there will be no sweeping of an army, at least in this series. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and stay tuned for the next one.